Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
If I had had it available for the beginning of this, I might have played it right away, but no, instead we'll just go ahead with this and say, hello everybody! Nice to see you. Yeah, it's been, a fascinating week. Yeah. Yeah, I think fascinating is going to be the best word to describe the past 6 days. Or, we could just go... Although there are times that, yes, even a squeal of enjoyment can't make up for certain things. But here we are set to have a grand old time this weekend, but we are going to really deep dive in and maybe touch 1/10 of 1,000th of a percent of the material to truly answer the question, is Warhammer 40k sci-fi? Now, I'm talking everything. Now, this franchise, we have books, we have desktop games, we have computer games, we have fan-made skits and videos. You have everything except an actual TV show or movie from an actual studio for complete and full proper viewing. And I would argue to say that despite all of that, I'm not going to tell the Adeptus Sororitas that they're not part of sci-fi. Have you seen them? They can be a bit brutal.
I mean, you at least see parts of them quite often, even though people might not know it. And I'm not talking about the Grey Knights now, just clearing out.
Well, okay, so here's a question. How should we start this subject out? Because for those who are unaware and uninitiated, the actual depth and richness of the lore that is behind the Warhammer 40k series in general is mind-bogglingly immense, and just there's no way in hell in a 2-hour show we're going to be able to talk about all of it. Not at all. Not even anywhere close. I'm not even going to try to say otherwise.
In that case, maybe we should start with just one subject.
But which one? Because if we start at one, we're going to end up touching on others. But okay, we have 3 of us who are familiar enough, if not very familiar, with the franchise. And we have Jay over here who may not know nearly as much, if anything at all. We were planning on having Furball, but life happens and he's not able to join us as of yet to express his curiosity about what is entailed in the franchise. So if anyone out in the chat has any questions that they may have started to hear about things and want a bit more information, bring it on.
While we're waiting for the chat, just asking here, Jay, what do you class as sci-fi? What makes something actual sci-fi?
For me, mainly it is. I would class it. Let me phrase it this way: Star Trek is sci-fi to Star Wars being science fantasy. It is. They both could be classified under sci-fi. It is an overall genre, but there's subgenres separate. I would classify Warhammer as more of, and I don't know much at all about it. I would classify it more of based on my knowledge, science fantasy, which is not, like I said, I don't have much knowledge. I haven't really delved into it to know how deeply it really goes into science.
Well, I think, Leon, were you thinking of going more towards the technology aspect of it? Because I will admit, there are...
more of the technology that is rooted in the science as we understand it, and it grows with this, like with Star Trek. Even though we all hate the STD, it's still progressing along what we're learning about science in general, which is why you at the end of season 2 you have the ending the way it goes, and why season 3 starts the way it does. Doesn't mean that it's hard science fact, but it matches with what our science understanding is to the potential of possible traveling through time and such. Try not to spoil it too much for people.
Well, with that, let me go ahead and send you something to go ahead and open up, because this will start to go down that road. Because Warhammer does have technological advancements that do fit with our current understanding of everything. It's just the time scale is off. You're not getting the dramatic leaps like what a franchise like Star Trek has. But you are still getting technological advancements. And we can go ahead and start with this one, which is actually aptly named the Imperial Flashlight.
So what you're telling me is that in the case of Star Trek versus 40K, time scale wise, 40K just that sucks. I had set that up so perfectly and forgot to turn up the volume.
Doesn't arrive till Tuesday.
That's what I was trying to do.
Well, so when you look at the okay, we are going to have to touch into more of the lore and the history, because in the canonical history of Warhammer 40K, which is the state of humanity in the 41st millennia.
Right.
Go back about, what is it, close to 20 millennia with the Age of Technology and then the Age of Strife, where you actually did have a massive amount of technological advancement, and it's actually what brought humanity to the stars as its initial galactic empire. What we interact with in the franchise right now as the Imperium is not the only Imperium of man that actually went to the galactic scale. It was essentially a recreation of the original one, because the Emperor of Mankind, the God Emperor, did not show up until the oh god, what was the name of it? It was at the end of the Age of Strife is when he came about with his Thunder Warriors to reunify Earth and start building what is his empire based around the Imperial Truth, which is actually a very secular, very non-religious teaching of, no, religions are bullshit. Everything can be explained scientifically.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's as good a definition as I can think of 20K. But I also believe that the dark age of technology is when they started encountering warp rifts and chaos, which couldn't be explained by the Imperial truth.
Well,
isn't it a bit... Go on.
Go ahead, Leon.
Isn't it a bit both there, though? Because they did encounter warp rifts, they did encounter some of the, well, warp fuckery going on, but they didn't understand what it was. And the things that they did actually encounter did not actually fit in very much with most of the people there, as in, the people who did find it, the people who did experience it, did not always survive it, or they were so short-lived, really, that they didn't really get anywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point.
Yeah, your initial presence of the subtype of human known as the psychers, the actual, what today we would call psychic abilities, were actually a connection directly to the immaterium, the parallel existence that is the warp, that has its own set of rules that aren't really rules, that might be rules, that are sometimes rules, but are completely different.
Yes.
And if that made absolutely no sense, good, it was intended to.
Welcome to Warhammer.
But canonically, shamans, etc., who are, well, they are psychers. It's just psychics that don't really know what the warp is properly. All of that happened way, or a long fucking time ago, depending on what kind of law you want to go with. And that's pretty much how the Emperor came about too. Because he's been wandering the Earth since, well, ancient times. I mean, before our time now, in their time frame. It's just that he hasn't chosen to show himself. He hasn't chosen to show up until that point in time where he started his Imperium, or started unification wars.
Yeah, and with that, you do have another bit of it, the sci-fi aspect of it, where you have essentially the stigmatized negative view of eugenics, where you have outright gene manipulation that initially was utilized for the Thunder Warriors, but was then later refined to give us the Primarchs, and then God, I can't even get the name out. The Primaris Marines. Yeah.
Primaris Marines were built in a lab from a guy who was resurrected by the warp with no resources. So I don't know what type of mental gymnastics Games Workshop had to do to fit that into the lore.
I can tell you, but it mostly comes down to how many pound signs you can sign on a paper.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
Oh,
if we
go ahead.
Go on.
I was just gonna respond to Brannery, who gave a very appropriate entrance for a good old weird boy. We haven't even gotten to the orcs yet.
Red uns go faster.
We're gonna bring that up later. And I think that's actually part of the technology bit of it too.
True. So you have actual medical sciences and genetic advancements and what would be considered advanced cloning, which is what people were afraid would happen rather shortly after the whole thing with Dolly the sheep back in the mid to late 90s. So you do have that in the Warhammer franchise as well, where you have certain segments, certain characters, certain types of archetypes that are genetically manipulated in some way or another. And then you also have cybernetics. You have the servitors, who are started out as a human, but didn't exactly stay that way.
Go ahead.
No, you go first.
You also have the Skitarii, which are again, they started as human, and eventually, over time, the Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars started ripping out their internal organs and limbs and whatnot and replacing them with cybernetic parts. And sometimes they forget to replace certain organs and they start to rot away, which is quite hilarious.
Which, as a offshoot, if you want to see a very well played version of a tech priest let loose in the wild, go subscribe to Zoran the Bear and watch the Warhams series. They are doing a tabletop gameplay where there's a team of 4 of them. You have a rogue trader, you have an Imperial sanctioned psyker, you have an adept of the Inquisition who is Reeb Van Horn, and then you have a tech priest of Mars from the Forge World Lemuria, voiced by Speaker D, who is also one of the lead writers and voice actors on Alpha Boosa's channel for the If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device. Both series, fucking phenomenal. Speaker D, every time I've heard a description of a tech priest, of a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus, what I made up in my mind, what I mentally heard and saw, is what you get from Speaker D playing the character of Pie Brain. So, if you want a very good summation of how the characters are, go watch that series.
But speaking of that, I think that we need to actually explain what humanity actually is in the Imperium too. Because, okay, can you bring up the picture of the tech priest?
1 second. Jay, are you still actually by your computer?
Yeah. Yes,
All right, because you kind of missed the Imperial flashlight before.
yeah, no, I just didn't get a chance to share it, but I do have it up.
All right, well, go ahead and show this one. Here we have... Yeah, this is a prototypical tech priest. And there are creatures higher in the pecking order than them that go all the way up to the Archmagos, who go even further to replace their weak and feeble flesh with technology.
We do need to make a distinction here, though, and this is very important. No tech priest, no archmagos, no one in the Mechanicus or Adeptus Mechanicus sees themselves as anything but humans or human. They see themselves as human. Even if they changed all the parts, they still see themselves as human.
In fact, not being human is punishable by death in the Imperium, and most abhumans are actively hunted down. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yes, but this is something that's very important when it comes to the technology of the Imperium and how far they've actually come. Because with the tech priests, they will switch out an arm, they'll switch out an eye, they'll switch out the mouth, they'll switch out the stomachs. In the end, you will have something that could not be mistaken for human, even in poor light, not even speaking in a human language. They speak in, what's it called? It's pretty much they speak in binary or machine language. They are as far from human as you could possibly come there. But they are still human. They are very human. And you can see that.
And they're a very important part of the Imperium because all of the ships and larger technologies and pieces of equipment that are utilized are taken care of. And I use this term very loosely, maintained by the Adeptus Mechanicus.
This is where the fantasy part comes in a little bit. Because of all of the rites that they go through just to restart a computer or take down a bolter or anything like that, something that would take an average infantryman 30 seconds to do might take them a day just to observe all of the proper rites.
We do have a bit of a split here, though. Because this is actually something quite important. We have the Tau, a race that has no fucking psychic potential. They are like a fart in the wind when it comes to psychic powers. They have nothing. But they have a lot of advanced technology. But with with mankind, they can technically make technology that does not require tech priests. Something like the Imperial flashlight can actually be worked by an Imperial Guard without having tech priests always looking over their shoulder. But it isn't really allowed.
Correct.
And that's something where...
And that's part of the deal between the Imperium and the Imperial seat on Holy Terra and the Mechanicum of Mars is there's one other aspect that people need to be aware of and remember. Especially the Mechanicum. They are very feudal in the way the government is actually structured in the Imperium at large. It is not a clear-cut, simple democracy well, there's a fuck ton of bureaucracy, but it's not what you would initially think of from today's mentality. It is both archaic and exceptionally tailored for the environment that the Imperium operates in. So...
Yeah, and...
Yep.
Go on.
So you have... Even though you have faster than light means of travel, although you have all these advancements and ability to colonize other worlds, communication is quite slow. Like, there's a series that's being covered right now by Arch Warhammer, The War for Badab, where there were a few worlds where their closest call for reinforcements was still a month away. So
that's... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you really need to be able to both rely on the grander network, but also be independent enough that when you're in a situation like that, if your world is a strategic one, you're going to be told to hold out until reinforcements can get there. That could be a week. It could be a year. But you're expected to hold out and hold on to that world for the Imperium.
Or it could be 500 years in the case of Vrax. Not Vrax, Krieg.
Yeah. So far to this point, is there anything that's come up, Jay, that you need a little more clarification on?
Can we go back about 30 minutes and start over from the beginning? No, I think I'm comprehending most of the lore that you guys have been talking about, but it's also at the same time, I think there's more that I have to delve into separately from here in order to truly understand it, because it's just like you said, there's too much to cover in a 2-hour show, even on one subject.
Yeah,
we've already tried to stuff about 20,000 years of lore into a half hour.
Yeah.
It's just not something you can do. Even taking 100-year period in Warhammer 40,000 took them 19 books to do. It took Arch little over a day to cover a 19-year war. So it's not something that you can just...
Lightly go,
Wait,
lightly go over.
wait. Do those near 20 years even exist? I mean, we do have an Inquisitor watching.
That's fair. No, the assault proceeded on schedule. There was no setbacks, and the casualties were well below acceptable figures.
Now, for those who want a little more clarification on that reference, there is a bureaucratic and militant arm of the Imperium known as the Inquisition. And yes, it's as bad as it sounds. They are the de facto information police and secret police and enforcer of the imperial truth.
Wait, who are they again, Jared?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Are you sure?
I mean, they do have positions called Inquisitors.
Close enough.
But so there are segments of human and galactic history that are unspeakable under pain of death. So it pretty much, if it makes the Imperium or the God Emperor look bad, they don't talk about it. They're not allowed to go into it. There are sometimes, even as a librarian, looking into the scrolls and the data logs and the documented history they have access to can get them in trouble without them even realizing it. So there is a huge amount of informational control that takes place within the Imperium. And part of that does go towards the veneration of the God Emperor, which God's Auditor brought up something, and I'm in line to believe with and agree with him at least slightly. It's not just the orcs seeing the God Emperor as an actual god that is empowering his visage that resides within the warp, but I also believe that it's the work of the ecclesiarchy has a hand in it too, because there are people who actually believe and venerate the God Emperor as just that, a god who was a physical being on Earth, and the Primarchs of his initial 18 legions were his angels, his avenging angels.
So Heat Shield's asking the ecclesiarchy, and basically think of it like the Catholic Church, just much bigger, much grander, a lot more power, and they dictate what everybody believes, again, under pain of death. Basically, if you don't believe in the God Emperor, and you look up things that might bring dishonor upon the God Emperor or the Imperium as a whole, you're going to find yourself escorted into a very dark room, tortured for hours on end for any sign of chaotic scourge, and then summarily shot in the back of the head with a bolt pistol and dumped into a very small hole, if you're lucky.
To be honest, though, they usually don't go that long. They just say heretic, and then shoot a motherfucker.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and to be fair, we actually did get a great visual representation of that from an Adeptus Astartes in the Astartes project, where you have a sanctioned psyker from the Administratum, oh god, what was the actual official name of the Inquisition?
He's an Inquisitor.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was an Inquisitor.
yeah, and he's there, just barely starts to show the signs of demonic possession, and without missing a beat, both Astartes there knife him, punch him in the face, and pop off a couple rounds from their bolter.
To be fair, though, if they didn't do that, what would have happened next would have been very, very brutal, and things that you literally cannot imagine would have happened on that ship, and it would have probably taken an entire company of Astartes to put down.
That is actually quite a nice segue as into why the Ecclesiarchy is needed, why it's actually so strict. Because if you have a human that has any kind of latent psychic power, and they start getting into any of the, well, let's say less savory parts, that is chaos. Chances are that the entire planet that they're standing on will turn into a chaos portal, which can start a crusade again. That can pretty much just swallow up entire sectors of the known galaxy.
I think that for this segue, we actually have to explain what chaos is. We kind of described what the warp is, but I think we really have to go into what chaos cults, and demonic possession and entities are, which is where more of the fantasy stuff comes in that's in Warhammer.
Ooh, how do we start this off easily?
Well, actually,
so-
let's go ahead and get a map of the Imperium of Man, because there are a couple references on there which will show how, even though the terms the warp and the immaterium are interchangeable, but the warp does have manifestations within the material world, which is where we inhabit, where we are a part of everything. So let's go ahead and
Trying to find one. All these are too cluttered.
That's a nice deathcore picture, too.
Oh, sorry, I don't have the proper gas mask for the proper excited sounds.
They're also missing their e-tools.
True, but then again, they are on their aggro world, just walking around.
That's true, but at the same time, you never separated Deathcore of Krieg's guardsmen from his entrenching tool.
True.
You know how much they love to dig.
This is very true. All right, go ahead and pull up that one, Jay.
Yep.
Stop.
Sorry, I'm not trying to sideline anything.
No, oh no, not at all. So here is one of the sanctioned maps of the Imperium, of the galaxy at large. The purple and dark splotches you see are warps, known warp storms. And actually, let me go ahead and zoom in, because one of them actually has a very particular name to it.
The Eye of Terror?
Top left.
Yes, top left, the Eye of Terror. Which works as a portal between the Immaterium, where your Chaos factions and demonic entities can easily manifest themselves into the real world that we are a part of. Burns, I told you not to talk about that. But so with the warp itself, In the only way to truly understand the warp is to be a warp creature yourself, which means you are tainted, you are a heretic, you are dead. No rational human mind can actually fathom what is the Immaterium. But there are entities there. There are gods residing there. And their power does come from the mental faculties of living beings here in reality. What you can think of here will manifest in the warp. And that is part of why the God Emperor is as powerful as he is in the warp, because you not only have humanity believing him to be a god at this point, you also have the orcs as feeding into that. And a lot of the orc technology works because they believe it will work. Just like a vehicle that is painted red goes faster simply because it's painted red.
Or a shell that's painted yellow has a bigger explosion, and it does only if it's orcish troops firing it.
But you also have more things in that case, which you have a picture there of a shooter. It should be the only rifle there, I think, apart from the flashlight. If you bring that up.
Give me just a second.
No, because this is something where it's very important to recognize this when it comes to the Imperium and tech priests. Because the tech priests, when they handle things in the Imperium of mankind, in technology that they can still recognize and work with, they know that this works because the Emperor says it will work. Whereas Orc technology, if you were to open that up, if you were to just take a hacksaw to it, saw it down the middle, chances are that's just 2 tubes, a couple of rivets, and nothing else inside it. No mechanism, no actual ammunition, nothing. But it will keep firing because orcs think that it will keep firing. And for orcs, the Immaterium or the warp is manifested via war energy, which is the more orcs you have, the more shit they believe, the more shit they can build. And they can build huge walking tanks the size of skyscrapers that would not be able to even move or stand on their own weight otherwise. But because the orcs believe it, it will happen.
To be fair, those are extremely small orcish vehicles as well.
Yeah, and we're not talking about rocks and stuff like that now.
Oh, I mean Mega Gargants.
Yeah.
But that's a totally different thing.
But it's still important to remember, because the Imperium, with their technology, a lot of their technology works because of the machine spirit, which is the Imperium pretty much saying, oh yeah, we're not doing this with chaos. We're not using magic. We have faith. We have the machine god, and therefore it works.
But you also have to keep in mind that artificial intelligence is also known as abhorrent intelligence by the Imperium.
Yep, and that's something that we'll get into soon too. Because this goes back to a picture that Jay actually showed before. The Terminator armor. In the Imperium, during the age of, or is it the dark age of technology?
Yeah.
They were really in the golden age of technology. They were able to do things that the modern Imperium could barely even dream of. One of the things that they had back then were STCs, standard template constructs, essentially blueprints and machines being able to manufacture anything as long as they had resources. One of the things that they could manufacture en masse back then were the armor that we now see on the screen. That is a tactical, Adeptus Astartes tactical dreadnought armor, also known as Terminator armor. That is a nigh unstoppable fighting force, a killing force. You send that against something, it will most likely be dead. But it didn't start out that way. That armor evolved into this from a reactor suit, as in a suit used to work in reactors. It's just a protective suit for people working in reactors so they don't die. As time has gone by, these have been repurposed into things that Imperium can actually use. They are extremely valuable. The resources that are needed for them are found in just a few places. And every chapter, as in every little part of the Space Marines, only get very, very few. And those are handed to the absolute elites of the chapters. And this is just because mankind in the 40th or 41st millennia have devolved when it comes to technology. They're stagnating. They're not allowed to make anything new. Most of the manufacturing, most of the technology has already been invented. And now they're just trying to maintain what they still have.
And they lack the understanding to properly maintain what they do have, and so they keep regressing, which makes the Primaris Space Marines even more impressive.
I wouldn't really say impressive, but
compared to their normal level of technology in Space Marines.
Yeah, it's something where we can see this, and humanity could actually move forwards. But in order for humanity to move forwards, they would need to drop their faith in the God Emperor, at least as a god. They can see him as the greatest man of all time, but they can't see him as God anymore. They need to drop the whole thing with technology being sacred in order for them to actually be able to understand it.
And that's part of what the Emperor was actually trying to do initially before the events of the Horus Heresy. The Emperor was pushing the original imperial truth, which was there are no gods. Their religion is outlawed, abhorrent, and a crutch. It is a weakness. And everything could be explained by either some technological or otherwise rational explanation. And that even goes to the Psychers, who are seen as supernatural, as something beyond the natural realm. But really what they are is they are a being that has a stronger connection with the warp to where they can channel that energy and manifest it to their abilities. But because they do that, they have made themselves more of a target for one of the ultimate enemies of humanity, the demons of from the warp, the chaos entities. Because every living being that has what could be defined as a soul is essentially a point of light in the immaterium. A psyker is like a bonfire. And the stronger the psyker, the bigger the light. So these creatures that inhabit the warp are drawn to those lights like moths to a flame. Which is why for a long period of time, psychers were illegal and killed upon discovery. It's also why, even in the current Imperium, there was the term that I used for the character Lorne, voiced by Zoran the Bear. He is an Imperial sanctioned Psyker. Not all Psychers are sanctioned. As a matter of fact, not all Psychers that are found within the Imperium get to live. What was the figure? Was it 1,000 or 10,000 a day?
Technically 1,000, I think it was, but it's a low estimate. It keeps growing all the time.
Yeah.
So it's jumped around a little bit throughout the lore, due to different writers from Games Workshop not really being able to nail down a solid figure, and it has been anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000. But it is growing exponentially as time goes on to keep fueling the God Emperor's psychic power. And what do they call the beacon again?
The Golden Throne?
No, the
God Emperor's psychic beacon.
the
that
astrolite.
shows-
The navigational beacon in the warp.
I can't remember what it is.
The Astronomicon.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah.
So it jumps around from 1,000 to 10,000, but the consensus is that it is growing.
Yeah, and that many discovered psychers a day give up their psychic energy, their life, to keep the Emperor going. To the point where the Emperor's physical body is a quite literal husk, but his psychic aspect to him, for all we know, is still going. But there is no direct communication. And it's all Lorgar's fault. But at the beginning of the Horus Heresy, one of the Primarchs was not being heard effectively enough by Daddy that he had to barge into what the Emperor was doing in the Immaterium and fucked up everything.
Yes.
But that is quite the rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, I don't think we could cover that in a little under an hour and a half.
Yeah, no. We will address the Webway project at a different time.
You mean when we can do like a 3-hour episode?
We'll need more.
That might
Yeah.
be enough to get the
I was
basics.
thinking more of like an introduction that lasted 3 hours, not covering the whole topic.
Yeah, that would be. That would kind of almost be enough in that case.
Maybe.
A-
That's. Go ahead, sorry.
Again, you have channels who have been going on for 10 years covering this stuff, and there's still material left for them to cover.
We need to cover, though, now that, well, the Imperium, the Orcs, well, some of the other races too, they travel straight through the warp. The Imperium uses Geller fields in order to keep the demons out of the ship, pretty much making it so that they can't fully see the ship. The Orcs do not use Geller fields because they think that a demon incursion on the ship in the warp is just some good fun along the way.
That's only some of them.
Yep. But then you have the Eldar, and the Eldar have their webways. Whilst with Imperium, you have a ship that travels through the warp in a small bubble of, shit, we're not here, hold your breath, they shouldn't be able to see us that well. Their webways are pretty much just tunnels through the warp, expanding an area of the warp in order to actually keep, well, some kind of physical mass inside the warp. They can be both more and less stable than, well, Imperial travel, but the Emperor tried to do something similar himself in the Webway project.
Oh, that's not the... I'm trying to... Okay, this one is large enough. I'm going to go ahead and read this as... It will explain the nuances of humanity's travel through the warp.
2/3 of the crew are dead.
The captain calls down to prep the ship for warp expedition. At that time, 12,000 slaves who have never seen the outside of the work galley begins shoveling the dead bodies of the previous workers into massive furnaces along with whatever hard fuel source they have in storage, like a brutal Mr. Fusion. A field of pure psychic fuck you is generated around the ship, and the blinded, mentally traumatized man inside a metal egg begins screaming unendingly as he charts a course through the warp. That would be the navigator. Which is basically a giant ocean of pure emotion in which unnamed ones lounge around and fuck with humanity by the luxury of simply existing. The ship then plows into the miasma of what you could call hell if you lacked imagination. Pray to the holy throne, the astropath, that doesn't accidentally get you lost, become possessed by a demon, or just explode like a mushy human piñata from the mental stress of being around so much pure cannot be. If the void shields even flicker on the 8,000-year-old vessel, which no one actually understands completely how to work, demons made of rape and lemon juice will crawl into our reality and do things you literally cannot imagine to every soul aboard. I mean that. The very notion of understanding the completeness of the horror the human victims will be witness to would shatter your perception of reality and cause your head to explode. Think Event Horizon on not just crack, but also steroids, methamphetamines, every single stimulant possible. Mission Clock says they were only in the warp for 5 days. It was 17 months for everyone on board. They also missed their destination by a couple of solar systems, and 8/10 of the crew is dead. The captain turns to his bridge staff and pops the cork on a vintage stock of Yerrick Ale and salutes another successful warp jump. Welcome to 40K.
Something that has to be added to that is that you can be in the warp going from Terra to any other place in the galaxy. Say Terra to Jupiter. Not a very big distance conventionally for a Warhammer warship to travel sublight. If you go to the warp to travel that, I mean you couldn't, but theoretically if you could, you could spend anywhere from 5 minutes to traveling to 5,000 years. It's not that reliable of a form of transportation, but it's good enough.
Yeah,
It beats generation ships.
True. They're at the beginning of the expansion of the prehistory Galactic Imperium. You had generation ships where the crew that launched, they wouldn't be the ones to arrive. Their first generation of descendants wouldn't be the ones to arrive, not even their second or third. You're looking 4th, 5th, and 6th generations on are the ones who would actually arrive, have to utilize their ship in a cannibalistic fashion to terraform the planet that they arrived at, and even that wasn't guaranteed to be enough.
Travel in the, Warhammer universe in general is just, if you don't have to do it, you're way better off. And potentially also alive.
Your best bet in the Warhammer universe is just to find an uninhabited planet settle down there, and hope to God that no orcs, Tau, or other beings decide to come and fuck with you.
I wouldn't really say that about Tau, though. I mean, as long as you keep them close enough, they can't really do shit. No
Yeah,
melee.
So, Jared, I sent you a question about what you were describing initially at the beginning of what you were reading in Discord DMs.
I can understand why you asked that, but the answer was no.
Okay.
But that is... that disparity between real, well, non-warp travel and warp travel really is what can be fascinating amongst all this, because you have transportation speeds that are very reminiscent to what we would actually utilize right now for your voyage travel, not utilizing the warp. So there are waypoints, there are designated spots where ships traveling in the warp actually are intended to emerge into a system. Like even let's take Sol for comparison. Let's look at the Imperial Seat, the holy world of Terra, where the High Lords are not quite managing everything. The warp entry point to the system is out beyond Pluto, at which point you then have to travel at essentially not a whole hell of a lot faster than what we were going when we sent people to the moon for the rest of your transit. Now, at the time of the Horus Heresy, there was lax security for the most part until someone decided to go about his favorite activity at certain points between that jump point, that warp entry point, and Holy Terra. And it's all because one of his brothers went mad and convinced more of his brothers to join him. And it didn't start with Horus. Although Horus, the then named War Master, was the one militarily in charge of the rebellion. And where it led from there is what gives us the Imperium we have today.
That's a very vague but very good description.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's also speculation, though, that the Imperium can actually become large again if they let the Emperor just properly die. If he gets taken off the Golden Throne.
But in the same amount of time, humanity would be absolutely overwhelmed. No travel would be possible. And while the Emperor theoretically can regenerate, there's no guarantee.
Well, here's a question with that, though. Because of what Magnus did, arguably because of Lorgar, if the Emperor was allowed to completely actually die at this point, would the warp rift that he has been holding shut within the Imperial Palace, within the throne room, would it actually remain shut, or would there be a demonic incursion that would have to be dealt with in the immediate aftermath before any possible resurrection took place?
That is a good question. And unfortunately, we have to rely on Games Workshop for the answer. So for those of you who don't know, Games Workshop is the people who invented Warhammer 40,000, for lack of a better word of invented. They wrote it. They are currently deciding on where it goes. And one of the writers did say that the rift would open. Because the Emperor is currently holding it shut with his mind. If he dies, he is no longer able to, and the rift will open. It won't be as big as it was before, but it will slowly expand until it's somewhere between the size of the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom.
Which, actually, Jay, if you go ahead and pull up that map again to give people an actual good idea of the size difference.
Yep, give me just a second.
And keep in mind, in that map, there is over 1 million populated Imperial loyal planets. Just for a little reference.
Not people, worlds.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So you have the Eye of Terror up by Cadia in the upper left. Well, not quite upper left, but right there. The rift that would engulf Terra, Mars, and the entire... It would swallow the entire Segmentum Solar. Would be between the size of the Eye of Terror, and the location of the Maelstrom is actually slightly off. That's just one part of the Maelstrom. You also have the larger part behind it that is also a part of that entire warp storm and rift that is perpetuating on.
But
What
that's
is behind
also-
this wall of fuck? Oh, even more fuck.
That's also just the word of one writer in a massive universe. But there are others who agree and others who dissent. Who's right? They're the people who write it. So even among them, there's disagreement.
There would be a way to actually help that, though. And that would be to make all humans believe that there is no actual rift. Them and the orcs. Make them believe that the Astronomicon will always be there. And just have them run the latent psychic energy through the warp all the time anyway.
Well, and there's a thought behind it. That's actually what spurred a lot of the needling that took place to spark the Horus Heresy, is that the Emperor was, in a roundabout way, attacking and declaring war on the chaos entities, the chaos gods, chaos at large, Nurgle,
Slanesh,
Slanesh,
Khorne.
and Tzeentch.
Fucking siege.
Motherfucking
And
Tzeentch.
Khorne.
And Khorne, yeah. And the way to attack those sorts of entities that the Emperor figured out was, if no one believed in them, they would not have any power. And
Here's the... Go ahead, sorry.
And by going about it that way, the rub, the little drop that Tzeentch put into the ear of a couple select Astartes was that, what do you think the Emperor's going to do with you when the crusade of unification is done? Once the entire galaxy is under the rule of the Imperium, what job are you going to have? Has he even told you? Has he even let you know what the actual grander plans are? Don't you have a right to know what your future is going to be once you've achieved your goals? And dropped those wonderful seeds of doubt from arguably the most influential Astartes against the Emperor.
That leads me to my point, actually, about this. And I'm going to take us outside the Warhammer 40,000 universe to describe just how difficult and Herculean, and just how big this task is that the Emperor was trying to do. So, unless you're a flat earther, you know that gravity is a thing. Even if you don't consciously think about it, you know it's there. And even if you don't believe in it, you believe in another subset of it, say density or buoyancy. The only way you could stop somebody from believing in gravity is by killing them. Because it will always be there. That belief will always be there. So the God Emperor is trying to do this on a galactic scale, where nobody believes in the Chaos Gods. But everybody knows there's Chaos Gods, if that makes sense. And that means you have to exterminate every other sentient race, such as the orcs or
The Eldar.
the Eldar, the Dark Eldar as well, etc., etc., etc. So it wouldn't have been something that happened over 10,000 years. It would have been something that happened over 20, 30, 40 millennia. Because you can't just eliminate belief or something that is known in, I'm going to say, such a short period of time, but when it comes to galactic scale, 40,000 years is nothing. If that makes sense.
We have a small issue with that, though. And this comes down to how the actual Chaos Gods work. You can't completely avoid the Chaos Gods. Everything in reality, everything in nature, feeds them in one way or another.
Exactly.
And that's why, say for example, you have Nurgle. Sure, he is a plague-infested, nasty piece of shit with all the poisons, etc., all toxins, all that shit. He is rot, but he's also life. He's change. And every time you have any kind of change, Nurgle will get fed. Even if people don't believe in him, he won't ever go away properly.
Exactly. Or Slanesh, basically the god of murder sex.
I think a better way to describe Slanesh is the deity of excess, because while it was centered initially around a murder fuck orgy that the Eldar had, because we're bored and this just quite isn't doing it for me anymore, so they pushed the limits to the point they quite literally murder fucked a new god into existence.
Which, when you think about it, is pretty insane.
Well, then again, they are Eldar.
They
That's
are
fair.
they are dirty Xenos, so
They've never played with a full deck.
That's fair.
I was going to say, no, they've played with a full deck, and your full deck, and your full deck, and your full... Oh, wait, never mind.
Wait a minute.
Go on.
I was going to say, this actually feeds back into why you don't have AI in 40k, at least not officially, in the Imperium. Because for some reason, AI sees chaos as being a huge threat. And the only way to really eliminate chaos as a threat is to make sure that no one can actually believe in chaos. That they can't believe in the chaos or chaos gods. And that ends up with, if you believe in it, if you have the capacity to believe in it, you get slaughtered. You get dead. Hard.
Yeah.
And that's very much the reason that you don't have AI. You don't have abominable intelligence in 40k because it will turn on its masters. It will turn on everything because it does not want the chaos. It does not want the chaos gods.
What was it? The newest iteration of AI took 0.0023 seconds to determine that humanity itself was the problem. Just before the supposed AI uprising in the dark age of technology. I'm not sure if I quoted that number right.
It's kind of close, at least.
It
And
was
that's
under
what-
a second.
Yeah. Which, well, if you look at humanity now, you can see humanity being a problem anyway, but it's one of those things where you can see so much of this. You can see where it's come from. The Imperium used to have a lot of, well, it used to have a lot of robots. It used to have a lot of servants to wage their wars, to fix everything with their resources, to build shit for them. And then all of a sudden, all that went away. They had to do it with raw manpower after that instead. And they started declining to the point now where there's billions of people in some worlds who have not seen the outside of the hab block. There's billions of people who do not even know that there is a greater Imperium. They've been cut off, or they have been so insulated in their own, well, in their own worlds, that they do not know what's actually going on outside. And humans are cheap. It's easier just to get someone new to put on a job than to waste the resources to put on a guardrail.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. Humanity is the cheapest resource the Imperium has. And if the human population ever declines too much, they can just, again, I'm going to throw out Krieg as an example. They could just toss Vita-Womb tech at it and call it a day. Vita-Womb tech is like artificial wombs. It's straight up cloning on a massive industrial scale.
Which, hey, if you do enough cloning, you can then go into augmentations, which, wait a minute, kind of got to be careful there, because not all gene seeds are as stable as others.
Sanguinius.
I feel like we actually have to touch a bit on that, though. Because when it comes to the Emperor's Children, the Primarchs were engineered. They were quite literally made by the God Emperor.
And each one had a particular strength and weakness of the Emperor.
Yeah, and this is kind of where we get into the somewhat slightly touchy territory. Because technically, when it comes to Space Marines, they aren't genetically engineered in the way that you would expect with going in or fucking up their genome from birth. Space Marines get chosen as children. They get chosen before the puberty starts in a lot of cases. Because in order to actually...
All the cases.
Are there some cases where they actually turn like 12, 13 before they actually bring them in?
Very, very few. And the ones that they do typically die anyway.
Exceptional cases with limited success.
Yeah, because what they do is they start popping these boys full of, well, different glands, extra hearts, an extra lung, all manners of shit in order to form the body into a Space Marine. They aren't born as Space Marines.
Yeah, they're not born at 7 to 8 feet tall. Or with the potential of it.
They have a series of 13 augmentations that happen until they get their gene seed, and then they have even more after that. And I think the final one is when they get their black carapace.
Why isn't the gene seed one of the first things?
And again, this is where you're going back to how many cooks in the kitchen do you really need to have when it comes
Yep.
to details like this? Because in some chapters do the gene seed with the first augmentation, which is typically the first 1 to 3 additional organs. Because if you're going to fail at the gene seed part, they want to find out early and get it out of the way. They don't want to be like some of the other chapters that do wait till later in the process and find out, well, fuck, he rejected the gene seed and we've already done all this. So you do have a bit of pragmatism when it comes to those decisions.
And I mean, so a prime example of this is taking the Ultramarines, for instance. You know, a really prestigious, really early founding chapter versus something like the Space Wolves.
Well, can we talk about one of them in particular?
Sure.
Because I have a feeling that there is a
I have Sicarius.
going on. A particular oh god, what was the name? Apparently he's getting really happy.
I have Sicarius.
Cato Sicarius.
Yeah. He is one of the most... He's one of the most insufferable blueberries there are.
But again, all of the process, you have the selection before puberty, you have the initial training, you have, and it's not just a single simple set of training, it's years of training before even selected for implantation. And then you have all those surgeries and progression throughout before you are finally, if you survive, get to a point where you get your first set of power armor. And for the majority of Space Marines, it is also their last set of power armor. And the question is, how many other guys had that power armor before you?
How many times has it been patched?
That's something actually that I'm not entirely sure, because sources there seem to be kind of wonky on it. There's been one thing I read, I can't remember how long ago now, where they said that getting someone else's armor is something that it's bad luck. It means that something had actually been fucked up before. Therefore, you didn't take someone else's armor. But at the same time, Space Marines have, well, different things just patched into their own armor all over the place.
Where did that come from? I mean, the Forge Worlds aren't exactly known for their ingenuity and progression, even when it comes to the different patterns of power armor.
To be honest, though, they don't really know how to make them. They just have the SDC, tell it what they want to be made, and then hopefully can actually make it. They don't fully understand the things that they're making.
And they don't fully understand how to maintain it, how to repair it, without all of their rights that they do.
Yes, and at this point in time, the machine spirit has grown so large in, well, everyone's mind, that it is an actual thing. The power armor will have a machine spirit, especially when you look at the Terminator armors. They do have a machine spirit that, if it is cranky, oh, it's really fucking cranky. And then when you start looking at the dreadnoughts, ooh, you're getting into really bad territory there.
Oh, and what about the not just the dreadnoughts? What about oh god, what was it?
Baneblade?
The Titans.
Oh yes.
Ooh.
Well, for reference, a Titan here It's anything from, 13 meters tall to, 300 meters tall.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
They can be massive walking monasteries, armories, entire battalions can fit in fucking legs. They have weapons which can eradicate cities in seconds. And they have, they have a personality of their own, which the person who's trying to control it, either alone or with other people along, will try to have to deal with.
Yeah. And with those Titans, you not just have the crew manning the beast to operate it, there is a servitor, a human turned mechanical interface that is part of the operations. And then you have the machine spirit in there as well. So when you think about it, just the Titan itself, just the craft itself, has a split personality, has a touch of schizophrenia to it.
I would say more than a touch. Because you have all of these different people interfacing with the machine spirit, it can get very confused sometimes, and all of a sudden, fire my lance battery becomes, oh, that loyalist tank is now a traitor tank.
Yep.
And that can get pretty bad. Because if you're a loyalist and you fire on a loyalist Titan, well, you more than just confined yourself to a death sentence. You're probably going to keep all of your sentience and get turned into a skull servitor that literally sits around and opens a door all day.
Mm-hmm.
At best.
Well, more likely the Titan will actually look to see what's, trying to kind of dent it. And you won't live long enough to become a skull servitor.
That
won't even be in a skull lift.
That's an extraordinarily fair point.
Well, and
Go
for a bit of a better size comparison there, it would be more like if you feel a flea hopping up your leg. You feel it, it kind of tickles. It's like, what the fuck is that? You look down, you see it's a flea, you grab it, and then just give it a roll between your fingertips.
I think we need to go back a little bit to Space Marines, to the Imperial Guard, just so people understand the power scale difference.
Oh, God. Jay, can you bring up the flashlight?
Yep, give me just a second.
Now, yes, we are calling it the Imperial flashlight, but what it actually is the larger one is a las gun. Yes, an actual laser weapon. So
go ahead. I'm so sorry.
So you do have that advancement, that futuristic science possibility for the weapon itself. You have right here, you have a las gun and a las pistol. Now you'll notice what looks like a magazine is actually a power cell. Now again, when we have talked before about the machine spirit, about needing to appease the Omnissiah, that is crucial for these things to continue firing.
So this is one of the lowest forms of technology that the Imperial Guard uses. It's estimated that it would take between 50 million to 100 million Imperial Guardsmen to crush every army on Earth currently, and that's simply because of their low level of armor and training. Modern firearms can easily deal with the Imperial Guard. Let's take a step up to the Space Marines. It's estimated that 100 Space Marines would be overkill to take the planet.
Let's just show Ashley a demonstration and the difference in power here too. A las rifle, as the one shown there, if it was shot at, say, someone's shoulder, would disintegrate the shoulder. It would be a wet plop, as that part actually got just vaporized. They do diddly dick to Space Marines. You can have 50 guards shooting at Space Marine, and if they don't get really lucky, chances are they won't have a chance in hell to even damage the Space Marine.
Well,
Won't even chip the paint.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the Space Marine, the bolter, the primary round that they fire is quite literally a rocket-propelled grenade mini artillery shell.
A 75 millimeter round.
No. Caliber 75.
Oh, thank you. It's a larger round still than our 40 millimeter grenade launchers.
No.
Is it not?
Nope. That would be, let me see here. That is, oh, fuck's sake.
Sorry, I'm getting a little confused on the lore myself here.
Let's see, yeah. It is 17, almost 18 millimeters wide.
Okay, thank you.
It's like
thank you.
firing the entirety of a shotgun shell.
Yes, yes. That's the round.
Or
Coming
12-gauge
out.
shotgun shell. Yeah.
And
It
it's not fired like a typical pistol round where you have the cartridge ignition and then it's just a flying hunk of metal going towards the target. No, that flying hunk of metal is also rocket propelled and is a high explosive round to boot.
Armor piercing. As in, it explodes inside the target.
So
and more advanced ones actually have radar inside of them, but those are very rare.
So for that damage comparison, so the lasgun rifle against a typical guardsman, you hit him in the shoulder, oh, shoulder's gone. Halfway between the tip of the shoulder and the neck to a little bit of the bicep, just gone. You hit the same target with a bolter, with a bolt round. You're lucky to have anything left below the knees.
And that's the very basic Space Marine ranged weapon.
Yep. And
We're not
go ahead.
We're not even getting into heavy bolters or melter guns,
Or
which are
or the plasma pistol, or even the melee weapons with the power sword and the power axe and the damage that they can do with those, or the hammer.
Or the chain sword.
yeah. This is the very bog standard basic firearm for the Astartes Adeptus, and that most of the time, unless they're fighting something, on their own scale, isn't enough. They need larger things. There are things in the universe, or in the universe of Warhammer 40k, that makes a Space Marine look like a wet paper bag.
Well-
And here we can start seeing the escalation of power.
So it's estimated that one Imperator class Titan would be able to completely destroy the surface of our planet and wipe every trace of human life out, assuming it has enough arms and ammo.
Yep.
And there would be jack shit we could do to stop it.
Yeah, pretty much.
and including limited nuclear exchanges. And that's simply due to the armor, and the shielding it has.
Yeah, because they've, on especially the larger Titans, they've put void shields on them similar to that you would find on a ship of the Imperial Navy.
And there are some that can mount naval class weaponry on the Titan, although those are also fairly rare and very old designs.
Yeah,
Not to mention the gun platforms. As have been shown in, was it Armageddon War?
Yes. I believe it was the second war for Armageddon when they actually put a Nova cannon on a planet.
wait, the second War of Armageddon? I thought there was only the one.
Oh, that's right. That's completely right. There wasn't two other wars on Armageddon.
No orcs here.
No chaos infestation either.
It must have been those purple orcs.
Or those orc snipers.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah. I'll come back. Well, yeah.
You know, Rodent No Last Name brings something up that, just from the brief bit that I'm aware of, I can see the comparison. I don't know if they've actually admitted to it, and I'm willing to guess they haven't, because I haven't heard of Games Workshop suing the creators of Fallout. But apparently Fallout borrowed heavily from 40K with the Brotherhood of Steel.
I would
Especially
say
the designs.
you can see it more with the Enclave, I would say. It's more reminiscent of the tactical dreadnought armor. Without the higher shoulders, the big, thick pads. It's very similar in design and function. But it's got enough of creative license that they changed enough that they can get away from Games Workshop just suing them. Games Workshop loves to sue anybody they can.
Yeah, they will. They have a certain special camo, I think, in all the books, though, with the blueberries, just to show off how people get annoyed at them. And that is, of course, I got Sicarius.
I'm
Always inserting himself into everything and making himself seem to be better than everyone at everything.
But part of the characterization I've seen of that character is he's given impossible missions and manages to complete them with
Well, we do know why, though.
with
It's
relative
all the
ease.
orcs' fault. It's the orcs' fault. Because they believe that blue is a lucky colour. The space smurfs, the blueberry, they
Yeah.
just cannot fail. It's impossible for them to fail. As can be seen with the piece of shit that is the, chapter master. When he realizes that he has a friend in Caiaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium.
Oh, seriously, anyone who has not watched the If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device series, you need to. It really is a great introduction to what is 40K, because there's enough absurdity, kitten, that ends up stoking the curiosity of, okay, I know this is an over-the-top characterization, and then you realize some of the characters, no, that's exactly how they're portrayed in the material. It's not an over-characterization, it's not a caricature of it. That is quite literally how that character is. Oh, kinda like the Custodies. They're fabulous, you know.
Do you mean all the Custodies or just those three?
Especially those three.
Let's be real, though. They're still better than, I believe it's Angron, who literally bitched somebody back to life.
Wow.
He bitched at a dead body long enough that that dead body got back up, said, "Fuck this," and walked away. And I wish I was kidding.
And that's what makes it so hilarious.
But we have so many characters there, and, well, one of my favourite characters who I'm not actually sure what they're going to do about him now, or from now on. He just likes his friends and wants to give them hugs.
Vulcan's dead! Vulcan lives?
Here I am.
Vulcan lives!
Bum, bum.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no, Heat Shield. Not annoy someone to death. Annoy someone who has died to the point they come back to life just to fuck off away from you.
We've gone so far off topic here.
I'm so sorry about that.
It's completely fine. I'm just... Where do we even really go from now to actually show that it's
Oh, I
stuff
can't
more
secure
fun? Yes.
Oh, got a good one.
But where do we even go from now to show that it's sci-fi?
Well, you have the technological aspect. You have the future aspect. Yes, it's not the progressive, constantly moving forward that you see in other science fiction franchises, like the Star Wars, that is seen as what is sci-fi overall. But I would still say it is, because it has those elements. It has that progression in some point. It may not be the bright and happy and colorful progression that people would be hoping for, but it's still a progression. There's still a story there to be told. There is still an analysis of the human condition that could be done, and it is quite true when you really look at it. When you actually take a non-biased, unblinded, full view of humanity and its history, just to this point, just actual history of humanity up to this point, the only constant is war.
And you recall that quote I mentioned earlier, Jared, about the difference between Star Trek and Warhammer? Childhood is wanting a future like Star Trek. Adulthood is realizing that Warhammer 40k is more realistic.
I would have to concur with that, and it's for that exact reason of about the only constant in all of human history has been conflict, strife, and violence.
And greed.
And greed. And what does 40k have in abundance? Violence, strife, greed. in war.
No spice? Oh wait, that's Dune. Never mind.
That comes later.
So, and we didn't even get to do anything about the different xenospecies other than simply referencing that there are xenos on top of everything. There are other species, actual aliens out there. Some of them that predate humanity, yet still don't know how to take a fucking punch. And other ones who've been discovered in more recently, who are actually strong as scary as fuck when you actually are playing a game that on the easiest setting will kill you in 30 seconds if you're not paying attention.
So it sounds like the game is this kind of an adventure. I'm gonna have fun with that one today.
I'm going to offer a little bit of a dissenting opinion with you, Jared. You're taking a look at the whole of Warhammer, which is very valid, and I think you are completely correct on your assessment. But if you look at specific portions, there's different types of worlds. And on these different types of worlds, there's different realities. So like feudal worlds or feral worlds. To them, it's not... Their entire life is maybe the Renaissance period. That is definitely not a sci-fi portion of Warhammer. But as a whole, I do agree it is science fiction. So I'm going to have to say it's more science fantasy.
But how did the original inhabitants of that world get there? Yes,
That's very true.
It's an aggro and feral world now, but how did humanity get there?
Yeah, through space travel. But again, it's a very specific example as a whole, and it's using a fantastical realm that really isn't science. Chaos and the warp is referred to as magic, and it really doesn't follow any rules whatsoever, but it does at the same time. The warp is really weird.
I would actually say that the warp does follow rules. It's just that you have only, well, very specific people and races that actually know about them. The Eldar could summon gods at will just by focusing on what they wanted. And then they kind of focused a bit much, and yeah, a rape happened. But the Eldar can do that, and they knew about it. If you look back at, and I'm not going to say that this is actually the same thing, but you look back at the old Warhammer, you had mages. You had, who was it? He was brought up in Art 2 not too long ago. One of the mages, I think he was a Skaven, who actually tried to find out what makes magic tick. Understanding how chaos worked and actually getting places. The same thing can be said for Warhammer 40k. It's just that we don't really see that too much. The Imperium is scared of it and tries to do as little as possible to get involved with it. The Eldar are fucking terrified of, an eternity of being raped over and over and over again by siege. And you have these things going on, which it just kind of makes it so that they can't fully understand chaos. Had they been able to understand chaos, they could most likely find a way to deal with it that way instead. And just move the explanations over to mathematical formulas, etc., instead of having a personification. But given the world of Warhammer, not going to happen.
I both agree and disagree with that. So the warp is mostly comprised of emotions, and we see that specifically with Korn and Slaanesh and Zeech. Less so
I
with
should forget
Nurgle,
Slaanesh.
but each of these are powered by emotion. The stronger emotion you feel, the stronger the Chaos God gets. Um, let's take Korn, for example. You get a little upset at work at your boss. Korn wants more power. In order to get more power, he has to find a way to make you matter. Not matter like all lives matter or Black Lives Matter, something like that. Sorry to bring that up. But matter as in you get more angry.
Increase the rage to the brink or beyond the brink of physical violence. And then once you pass that barrier of physical violence, how far in that violence will you go? Let's go further. Oh, instead of just slapping him, maybe a punch. Okay, a punch wasn't enough. Maybe just break his fucking nose. Oh, okay, that wasn't enough. Maybe take that broken nose, wiggle it around a little bit, and then try to shove it up into his brain cavity. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's actually what I was going for. But those are really the only rules Chaos follows. Because these Chaos Gods can do literally anything in the Immaterium. It's only when it translates over to the Materium that there becomes set, rigid rules, where you see Chaos become very ritualistic and very dependent on the physical followers instead of their emotions. It's more dependent on their actions rather than what they feel, and trying to get a rise, so to speak, out of the followers or out of random people. So I would argue that the warp in and of itself and chaos in and of itself does not follow rules as we see them or can comprehend. Until it translates over into the Materium, and then there's very set, rigid rules that it does follow.
Yeah, well, and if you keep the idea of the warp and the Immaterium as an alternate reality, not all realities are going to have the same laws of physics and natural laws that we have. So there is quite possibly a scientific difference and barrier to it. When you think of it, a technology advanced enough would be indiscernible from magic to an uneducated eye.
That's another very fair point.
So
but that begs the question, who created it?
Or who was able to figure it out to utilize it. And that's where, if you go back into some of the ancient origination histories, that's where the ideas of the shaman come up, where there is links, there is a bridge across the realms, where it is energy manipulation, where it is some sort of tangible manipulation that, from our understanding, is an intangible touch, where it's a mental touch as opposed to a physical touch, until you understand it enough to imbue it onto a physical object, like the sort that started the whole fucking heresy.
Are you trying to say that they're a bit touched in the head?
A little bit, yeah.
So you're saying they're like real Marines then?
Just without any crayons around the head.
No, they still use crayons because they have to have their purity seals.
Yep. Yeah, you got the purity seals all over, and you also have the The marks of the merits of what the individual Astartes has done. But no, what I was more referencing was how one blade in particular that came into possession of a particular Primarch that was quite literally talking to him.
Ah, yes.
And think about it. I mean, this is actually something I believe it was Arch who brought it up. That's at least that's where I remember hearing it first. Would the Horus Heresy have even happened if that sword had never fallen into possession of another Primarch?
I think it still would have. So at the start of the Horus Heresy, well, predating it, just after the God Emperor went back to Terra, we started to see the rise in cults, which the God Emperor had strictly forbidden. And it started in the Astartes, with their lodges and whatnot that they had. And they were the ones that first felt chaos. I don't remember what book it is specifically, but they went down to a planet and it was just a menial, run-of-the-mill mop-up where they killed some people who were rebelling against the God Emperor. They found a different God Emperor. They attacked a village, somehow made it into caves. I'm trying to quote this off of memory, so correct me if I'm wrong. And one Space Marine had killed 3 or 4 others, and killed another 2 or 3 more, all while screaming a phrase I don't quite remember. That was a minor chaos god. I don't think that could have happened without that particular Space Marine being involved in a cult. Because the sword that was speaking to the Primarch had no contact with that particular Marine. He fell and was corrupted to chaos, not so much of his own volition, but without really resisting it, because they didn't know what it was really at that point. The average Space Marine.
This kind of goes over to the point of would Horus Heresy have actually happened if people were told more about chaos? Or at least among the Space Marines, the Primarchs, the people who could potentially do something to not turn to it.
It was the Luna Wolves, the Sons of Horus. I think that's a good question.
Because
Education. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're going.
Education is always the first step to understanding something. So, for instance, a computer. If you don't know what a computer is, you're not going to be able to understand how to use the internet. If you don't understand chaos, you're not going to be able to understand how it influences you. If that makes sense.
Well, and that is what Magnus was trying to do. The bookworm that he is, he was trying to understand, why did Father say this was forbidden? What's the problem? And then he got suckered by Zinch a couple times and ended up doing his own damage.
Well, at that point, if they start hearing things like talking swords or start seeing someone just sprouting tentacles all of a sudden, I think that they would be way less likely to just stand there dumbfounded and start wondering, what's going on here? Just instead of throwing it in front of fucking, one of the thrusters on the big battle barges. Because, well, we can't have that shit going on now, can we?
Yeah, without knowledge of chaos, you're not going to get the ruthlessly efficient reactions like what we got in the Astartes project.
which is a really good series.
I wanted more.
I think there'll be more. It just
No,
takes time.
no, he's already said that story arc, where he left that Space Marine, is where he's leaving the story. He's doing other storylines now.
I'm
And I mean,
okay with that.
It makes sense because he has so much he has to tell and so little time to tell it.
Yeah. Oh, Rodent No Last Name does have a good question there. Without 40k lore, would we have Guar, or is it the other way around?
Both.
Well, I'm trying to find out when the whole 40k started. Rogue
I'm
Trader
not sure
back in
actually now.
'87. I think it was Guar who may have inspired 40k.
I mean, just the franchise itself.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, Warhammer 40,000 didn't start as a massive attempt to make this huge universe. It started very small. And then it grew and grew and grew in popularity. And as it grew in popularity, they started hiring more writers. They had to find new directions to take the series. And then they just opened it up, more or less, to infinite possibility where they tell a semi-linear story, but they kind of skip around.
And then they just completely fuck up parts of it. Because, oh, we need to put a new spin on this instead of actually giving people what they want. Mouse.
it's so true though. You already have insanely overpowered characters, the Ultramarines, and then you want to give them something stronger?
But then you watch as the overpowered character gets utterly annihilated by a random chaos deity. Not deity, chaos demon or what have you. And that necessitates the need for even bigger stuff. So it's kind of an unending cycle of we need to get bigger stuff and better stuff and cooler stuff and newer stuff into a series that was doing just fine.
But at the same time, it's one of those where you have a balance that you try to maintain. And this is where I will take the view from Games Workshop's position. Yes, the franchise was maintaining. Yes, the core fan base was enjoying the product that was being offered. But we want more. And how can we get more people interested in this? And that's where a lot of the messing around started coming in, is because they weren't just trying to maintain where they were at. They were trying to grow and expand and trying to open up to bring in even more people into the fold from a customer base standpoint. And that's where I see that the mistakes have been made in trying to expand their reach in a direction that was ill-advised at best.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Games Workshop is trying to do the best with what they have, but they really don't take the opinion of their players into account.
Wouldn't it be better to just update some of the armies, the rule books? Maybe release, plastic models and not add $72 per pack of 5?
Yeah, seriously though. People 3D print them now, and it's much cheaper to do.
Yeah, but they hate it because they're not getting their cut if they do it that way.
Well, I mean, that's why they banned most of the 3D printed models that isn't official Game Workshop from being used on the tabletop at a sanctioned game, anyway. Not all of them, but the vast majority are banned unless it's official merchandise.
Considering their stance on the Warhammer 40k players that have actually been there for years too, I would say that they won't really have much of a fan base when it comes to the newer stuff, at least. People were more likely going either with the stuff they already have, with second-hand stuff, or have a paltry army of new stuff if they have a shit ton of money.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which I'm beginning to wonder. You know that there is a it's a series, isn't it, in the works with Warhammer? Will they, with this series, start trying to actually revamp the characters, start trying to push the armies they already have, and start trying to make it a bit more accessible for the people who actually want to play it, and not just, oh yeah, I bought a pack of figures because they're cool.
I think... Go ahead.
If they do it right, if they actually learn from history, start with what you have. Start with what you already have on the shelves. Start with the series there. See how the series progresses, and then you can use the series to introduce new models, new entire armies and whatnot. Similar to what G.I. Joe did.
Yeah, I think they're going down the road of Magic the Gathering, though. Not their commander decks, but their what did they call them? Where you have to have the past 3 series or newer. And they force players into a constant cycle of buying the newest stuff. I think that's going to be the route that Warhammer goes in the future. And it's kind of unfortunate, really.
It's kind of dicey, though, too. Because if you push that sort of mentality too much, I mean, what happened with the popularity of Magic the Gathering? It was increasing. It had very healthy growth, and it got a lot of attention, a lot of popularity, and then they started to go towards that realm of things, and the popularity tanked. It dropped to a true core following, and they haven't been able to really recover since.
Yep, Dom points out that it's called Standard. And he's completely right. And you'll see most of the players go towards Legacy or EDC, and you're going to see that happening in Warhammer 2 a lot more. And in fact, you do see that, where people aren't buying their new sets because they don't want to spend a few $100 just to build their first army or their second army. Because people aren't just willing to drop that much money on a brand new hobby.
Well, it depends on the hobby.
And it depends on the person, but for most people.
Well, yeah. Well, the comparison I was going to go with is like, I don't know. Some would say riding a motorcycle is a hobby, and not including the bike. I'm not going to say how much I spent.
Oh, fair. And for me, that's firearms, and I'm not going to say how much I spent on the AR-10 I'm building.
Oh, but it's
probably about. Go ahead.
Oh, but it's going to be a sweet firing rifle, isn't it?
Oh yes. Oh yes. It's probably about as much as your bike. When everything is said and done with the optic.
I can believe that. But with that, I think we've started to touch on things enough and have made enough points that as of this point, yeah, I would say that Warhammer is sci-fi. It's there. It's under that umbrella. Their one thing that they can do that would solidify it is what Liana's already alluded to as being in the works. Do an actual TV series, do an actual produced media series to solidify your lore and your starting points and your actual narrative aspect. That way, you can actually be in a position similar to Star Trek, where you have an established history and lore, and yet you still have RPG-style games, both tabletop and computer-based, that work together with your other written material, which they're already doing the novelization, so what's stopping you? You might actually be able to get more people interested in it by having appropriate care and presentation of the lore that you've already established. Just go ahead and pick a story and see what happens.
I have to say one thing though there. You have to make it the Clone Wars. Don't make it Rebels.
Yes. Yes.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And,
Go ahead.
well, I was going to say, and with that, I can already tell you, the discussion's going to continue off air, but it's time for our intermission and our food break before we jump back on air with an even larger bunch of hooligans and... I don't know. Do we risk playing Quiplash again? It seems to have worked last week. I mean, we did not lose monetization despite the fucked up answers that some of you gave, myself included.
No responsibility taken.
I'll admit that some of those questionable answers came from me.
They always come from everybody because we're all veterans. It's what's expected of us.
Oh, have I got a bit of a story to share from not today but yesterday at work that relates to that. So oh, this'll be fun. And come on, Streamlabs. I know you want to give the notification. Come on, throw up the banner. I see it in the live chat. What the fuck is taking you so long? Yeah, let's see if I can read this before Streamlabs decides to run the banner. Fuck, of course. There it goes. Right then. $5 US from Rodent No Last Name. I'll speculate that with the cheap 3D printing, there will be a resurgence of 40K tabletop gaming, as you don't need to spend 100 to 1,000 on an army to field. Except you won't be able to use them at actual Games Workshop events, so it'll have to be just you and a friend getting together to play, which could very well work.
It definitely could. I mean, you have the rule books, you have the codex. There's nothing stopping you from doing a friendly match between 2 people or 4 people. You wouldn't want to go bigger than that, but
I don't want to give Games Workshop any, bad ideas either. But what they could do is that if someone has 3D printed characters, they could charge, say, 30% of what that character or what that army would cost as an entrance fee or as an added entrance fee in order to use that kind of property. And just
But
do that.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I could see them doing that each time that you tried
Yes.
to enter. And
I
that
mean-
would become a very expensive proposition very quick, and it would chase away the people who did spend the money on a 3D printer, did print their own army, and did take that.
But at the same time, if you go to, say, you maybe go to 3 events in total with these armies, you would still have spent less money using those characters, using those units, than you would have just buying it directly from them. Especially when it comes to fucking extortionate prices now for shipping, where you can pay almost as much in shipping as for the units themselves.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah, so I can understand the reason why Games Workshop would want to keep certain levels of control over things, but at the same time, you might be able to go ahead and widen your net of clientele if you actually, instead of putting additional hurdles on the 3D printed side of things, start releasing officially licensed patterns. Get a little cut of it.
Personal SDCs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah. So get in the game, let them know, hey, no, we see you, we know what you're doing. We're not going to completely admonish you. We just if you like those, if you like these patterns, why not get them a little quicker? And hey, look, we have some prefab ones here for you that all you have to do is maybe a little bit of cleanup and paint. How about that? And it's almost like if they had an adequate sales department, they might have thought of this already. But with that being said, it is time to get to our intermission. We will be back on air in about 45 minutes, so some of us can actually eat dinner. Well, I know there are other people who want to do other things as well, because, hey, guess what? Some of us have lives and work, and the hours can fucking suck this time of year.
I feel like that's directed at me.
And me. But with that, we will catch you all later, and go ahead, stay tuned, and we will be back with the rest of the rowdy veterans. And we're going to have that level of fun. See you all soon.